In Millbrook, Illinois, an exhausted widow inheriting her grandmother's failing bread factory discovered a draft coming from a basement wall that shouldn't exist. Sofia West, a nurse drowning in debt and grief, broke through the concrete to find $180 million in hidden currency, gold certificates, and bearer bonds. What she thought was a burden became a deadly mystery involving Cold War refugee smuggling, federal investigations, and ruthless developers willing to kill. Her grandmother's bread trucks had concealed an underground railroad, and the fortune waiting beneath required someone brave enough to decide its fate. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, wedged between a past-due hospital bill and a credit card statement Sofia didn't have the energy to open. She stood in her kitchen, still wearing her scrubs from the night shift, and stared at the law firm's return address. Millbrook, Illinois, a place she hadn't thought about in 15 years. Her hands trembled as she tore it open. The letter was brief, formal, devoid of sentiment. We regret to inform you of the passing of Magda Kowalski, sole beneficiary, Heritage Bread Factory. Please contact our office to arrange estate settlement. Sofia read it 3 times before the words truly registered. Grandma Magda was dead, and somehow, impossibly, she'd left Sofia everything. She sank into a kitchen chair, the letter still clutched in her fingers. The exhaustion she'd been holding at bay for months, years, really, since Michael's accident, crashed over her like a wave. She'd worked a double shift, 16 hours on her feet in the ICU, navigating other people's tragedies while her own life crumbled around her. The medical debt from Michael's final months sat like a boulder on her chest, $47,000 and counting, with interest that never stopped accumulating. And now this, an inheritance from a woman who'd been nothing but a ghost in Sofia's life. A grandmother who'd cut off contact when Sofia was barely out of college, for reasons her father never fully explained beyond bitter warnings. Stay away from her. She's dangerous. She ruins everything she touches. Mom! Emma's voice cut through her thoughts. Her daughter stood in the doorway, dark circles under her eyes that mirrored Sofia's own. 16 years old and carrying grief like a weight she'd never learned to set down. You're still in your scrubs. Did you even sleep? Sofia folded the letter carefully. I need to tell you something. The drive to Millbrook took 3 hours, cutting through flat Illinois farmland that seemed to stretch forever. Emma spent most of it staring out the window, earbuds in, her silence a wall Sofia no longer had the strength to scale. In the back seat, 11-year-old Lucas pressed his face to the glass, watching the landscape change. Did you ever meet her? Lucas asked suddenly. Great-Grandma Magda? Sofia glanced at him in the rearview mirror. His eyes, Michael's eyes, were wide with curiosity rather than judgment. A few times, when I was little, I barely remember. That wasn't entirely true. She remembered fragments. A stern woman with iron-gray hair pulled tight, flour dusting her strong hands, the overwhelming smell of yeast and cinnamon that clung to everything in that factory. She remembered whispered conversations between Magda and her father that stopped abruptly when Sofia entered rooms. She remembered the last time she'd seen her grandmother, at 23, standing in that same factory office while Magda's face remained impassive. Your father has made his choices. Now you must make yours. Sofia had chosen her father. It had seemed simple then. Why did you stop talking to her? Lucas asked. Emma pulled out one earbud. Because Dad said she was crazy. Remember? That's not. Sofia started, then stopped. What could she say? That she didn't know the truth? That she'd simply accepted her father's version of events because it was easier than questioning? She left you a factory, Emma said flatly. A bread factory in the middle of nowhere. That's what we're missing school for. Emma, whatever. The earbud went back in. The law office was tucked above a pharmacy on Millbrook's Main Street. The town looked like it was slowly dying. Half the storefronts empty, the ones that remained clinging to life through sheer stubbornness. Mr. Kowalski's Meat Market, Betty's Diner, a hardware store with sun-faded signs in the window, The lawyer, a tired-looking man named Harold Chun who couldn't have been much older than Sophia, spread papers across his desk with the careful precision of someone delivering bad news. "I'll be frank, Ms. West. The estate is complicated." He adjusted his glasses. "The factory building itself is yours, free and clear. Your grandmother owned it outright. But the business has been operating at a loss for the past decade. There are outstanding debts, property taxes, utility bills, equipment loans. The assets barely cover the liabilities." Sophia scanned the documents he pushed toward her. Numbers swam before her exhausted eyes. The factory was assessed at $340,000, but owed $89,000 in various debts. The equipment was outdated, much of it non-functional. There was a small savings account with $12,000, barely enough to cover immediate expenses. "So I'm inheriting debt," Sophia said quietly. "You're inheriting a choice." Harold leaned back in his chair. "You can disclaim the inheritance, walk away, or you can accept it and decide what to do with the property. There have been offers." "Offers?" "A developer, Frank Hutchins. He's been trying to buy the property for years. Your grandmother refused every offer." Harold's expression suggested he thought Magda had been foolish. "He's already contacted me, knowing about Mrs. Kowalski's passing. He's prepared to make a very generous offer. Enough to clear the debts and leave you with a substantial sum." Sophia looked at her children. Emma was scrolling through her phone, deliberately disengaged. Lucas was studying an old photograph on Harold's wall, a black-and-white image of Millbrook's Main Street from the 1950s, the Heritage Bread Factory sign visible in the background. "I want to see it first," Sophia heard herself say. The factory. The Heritage Bread Factory sat at the edge of town, a 3-story brick building that might have been impressive once. Now it looked like something time had forgotten. Windows were cracked or boarded over. The loading dock was littered with debris. The sign, "Heritage Bread, baked fresh daily since 1952, hung at an angle, several letters missing. Sophia used the key Harold had given her to unlock the side door. It stuck, swollen from weather and neglect, and she had to put her shoulder into it. The smell hit her first. Decades of flour and yeast, baked into the walls and floors, mixed now with must and decay. The main production floor was a cavern of rusted mixers and silent ovens. Conveyor belts frozen mid-motion. Everything covered in a layer of dust that suggested the factory had been quiet for years. "This is creepy," Emma announced, her voice echoing in the empty space. Lucas had wandered toward the old brick ovens, his fingers trailing along their surfaces. Something in his expression made Sophia's chest tighten, a recognition she couldn't quite name. "Why would she leave this to you?" Emma asked. "You guys didn't even talk." "I don't know, sweetheart." Sophia moved through the space, memories surfacing like bubbles in dark water. She'd been here as a child, 5, 6, running between the machines while workers in white aprons moved with practiced efficiency. The sound of dough being kneaded in industrial mixers. The heat from the ovens. Magda's voice, commanding but not unkind. "Careful now. This is a workplace, not a playground." The office was on the 2nd floor, accessed by a narrow staircase. Magda's desk remained exactly as she must have left it. Papers neatly stacked, a calendar frozen on a date 3 months past. Sophia ran her fingers along the desk surface, disturbing the dust. In the desk drawer, she found more papers. Financial records showing the factory's slow decline. Payroll statements from years ago. And beneath it all, a small black and white photograph. A young woman in a simple dress standing in front of this same building, the sign behind her bright and new. The woman's face was stern, but her eyes held something else. Determination, maybe, or defiance. Magda, Sophia realized. Impossibly young, impossibly distant. "Mom!" Lucas's voice carried up from below, excited. "Mom, come look." She found him in what must have been the recipe development room, a smaller space off the main floor with a single domestic-sized oven and workspace. Lucas had discovered a shelf of notebooks, their leather covers cracked with age. "Look." He held one open, his fingers careful on the yellowed pages. Recipes, all handwritten. Sofia leaned over his shoulder. The writing was precise, methodical measurements and instructions in Magda's distinctive script. Honey wheat, sourdough 3-day starter, cinnamon raisin. Hala! There are dozens of them? Lucas breathed, turning pages with reverence. Something in his face had changed. The grief that normally shadowed him had lifted, replaced by genuine wonder. Can we try them? He asked. Making the bread, I mean? Before Sofia could answer, Emma called from another doorway. There's stairs going down. To a basement or something. The basement stairs were steep and narrow, the air growing cooler as they descended. Sofia found a light switch that worked, illuminating a large space filled with decades of accumulated storage. Old equipment, boxes of supplies, filing cabinets that probably held records going back to the factory's founding. Emma had her phone out, using its flashlight to probe the darker corners. It smells weird down here. Like, I don't know, old. Sofia was about to agree when she noticed it. A draft. Cool air moving across her face from a direction that didn't make sense. She followed it to the far wall, concrete blocks, water-stained and ancient. But when she pressed her hand against the surface, she could feel air moving through a seam. She ran her fingers along the wall, tracing the edges. The mortar was different here, newer, a slightly different color. And there, nearly invisible in the dim light, a gap where the wall didn't quite meet the floor. Mom? What are you doing? Sofia pressed harder and something shifted. Not much, just a fraction of an inch. But enough to confirm what she was beginning to suspect. This wall wasn't original. It had been added later. And behind it, the draft suggested, was empty space. She stepped back, her nurse's mind automatically cataloging symptoms. Elevated heart rate, shallow breathing, the particular kind of alertness that came from sensing something wrong, or unexpectedly right. Lucas had followed her down, the recipe book still clutched in his hands. What is it? Sofia stared at the wall, at the seam, at the gap where cool air whispered through like a secret waiting 60 years to be told. I don't know, she said slowly, but I think your great-grandmother was hiding something. The factory settled around them, old wood creaking, dust motes swirling in the weak light. Somewhere above, a wind chime Sofia hadn't noticed before sang softly, a sound like distant voices or a warning or a welcome home. Sofia pressed her hand against the false wall one more time, feeling the draft against her palm like a breath. Behind this concrete was something Magda had wanted hidden. Something worth the effort of building a false wall, of keeping secrets, of cutting off her family to protect them, or to protect what she'd concealed. The exhaustion Sofia had been carrying seemed to lift slightly, replaced by something she hadn't felt in 2 years. Not hope exactly, but possibility. The sense that her grandmother's final gift might be more than a crumbling building and a mountain of debt. It might be answers, or questions, or both. Come on, she told her children, her voice steadier than it had been in months. We need to get back to the motel. We'll come back tomorrow with proper tools. But even as they climbed the stairs back to the main floor, even as she locked the factory door behind them and drove back through Millbrook's dying streets, Sofia's mind remained in that basement, pressed against that wall, feeling the whisper of air from whatever space lay beyond. What were you hiding, Grandma? She thought. And why leave it for me to find? The motel room was cheap and smelled of disinfectant. Emma immediately plugged in her phone and disappeared into her screen. Lucas carefully placed the recipe book on the nightstand beside his bed, his fingers lingering on its cover. Sofia stood at the window looking out at nothing. In her pocket, her phone buzzed, another bill collector probably, another past due notice, another reminder that her real life was waiting back home, with its debt and exhaustion and endless, grinding pressure. But her reflection in the window showed something different in her eyes. A spark. A question mark. The beginning of a puzzle she couldn't walk away from, even if the sensible thing would be to sell the factory to that developer and take whatever money she could get. She thought of Magda's stern face, the whispered conversations that stopped when children entered rooms, her father's warnings about danger and ruin, and she thought of that wall, that hidden space, that draft like a whisper saying, "Look deeper. There's more here than you know." Tomorrow, Sofia decided, she would return with a crowbar. She would see what her grandmother had hidden behind that concrete. Whatever it was, whether it changed everything or nothing, she needed to know. The truth about Magda Kowalski, and maybe, in finding it, some truth about herself, waited in the darkness behind that wall. All Sofia had to do was break it open. Sofia couldn't sleep. The motel bed was lumpy. The air conditioner rattled like something dying, and every time she closed her eyes, she saw that wall, the seam, the draft whispering through concrete that had been placed there deliberately, carefully, to hide something. 2 in the morning, she gave up. Emma was sprawled across one bed, earbuds still in, her face slack with the kind of sleep Sofia envied. Lucas curled small in the other bed, the recipe book tucked under his pillow like a talisman against nightmares. Sofia pulled on jeans and a sweatshirt, moving quietly. She left a note on the bathroom mirror. Couldn't sleep. Went for a drive. Back soon, knowing Emma wouldn't wake before noon anyway. The factory key felt heavy in her pocket as she drove through Millbrook's empty streets. No traffic lights, just stop signs marking intersections where nothing moved. The kind of small-town darkness that pressed against car windows like water. The factory loomed against the night sky, darker than the darkness around it. Sofia parked in the loading dock area and sat for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled. This was foolish. She should wait until morning. Bring the kids. Do this in daylight with proper preparation. But her hands were already reaching for the key, her feet carrying her to the side entrance. Her nurse's brain cataloging the elevated heart rate, the shallow breathing, the particular cocktail of fear and anticipation that made her fingers shake as she unlocked the door. Inside, the factory was different at night. The production floor stretched into shadows that her flashlight couldn't quite penetrate. Every sound amplified, her footsteps on concrete, the groan of old wood settling, something skittering in the walls that she chose not to identify. The basement stairs seemed steeper in the darkness. Sofia descended carefully, one hand on the wall for balance, her phone's flashlight beam bouncing ahead of her. When she reached the bottom, she stood still, listening. Nothing but her own breathing and the distant hum of Millbrook sleeping above ground. The wall was exactly where she remembered. She pressed her palm against it, feeling that draft, that whisper of air from somewhere it shouldn't be coming from. In daylight, it had seemed like curiosity. At 2:30 in the morning, alone in a dead woman's basement, it felt like compulsion. Sofia had grabbed tools from the factory floor. A heavy crowbar, a hammer, work gloves she'd found in a maintenance closet. She pulled on the gloves now, positioned the crowbar's edge in the seam where wall met floor and pulled. Nothing happened. She repositioned, braced her feet, pulled harder. The crowbar slipped, and she stumbled backward, nearly dropping her phone. Her shoulder throbbed where she'd wrenched it. "Come on," she muttered, trying again. This time she wedged the crowbar higher, where the mortar looked weakest. She threw her weight into it, months of carrying patience and working double shifts translating into leverage. Something cracked. Not the crowbar, the wall itself. A chunk of mortar crumbled away, and suddenly the draft wasn't a whisper anymore but a breath. Cool air pushing through a gap the width of her hand. Sofia's heart hammered as she worked the crowbar deeper, prying at the blocks. They came away easier now, revealing that this wall was only one layer thick. Behind it, darkness, empty space, and the unmistakable smell of controlled climate, the particular scent of dehumidified air. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. 20 minutes later, she'd created an opening large enough to squeeze through. Sofia stood in the gap, breathing hard, her flashlight beam probing the space beyond. Concrete steps leading down. Not rough and ancient like the basement, but smooth, recent, descending into a sub-basement that had no reason to exist. She should call someone. The police. Harold, the lawyer. Anyone who could witness what she was about to find, who could verify she hadn't planted whatever was down there. Instead, Sofia climbed through the gap and descended the hidden stairs. The sub-basement was smaller than the floor above but meticulously organized. Climate-controlled, as she'd guessed. She could hear the hum of a ventilation system that must be powered by its own circuit. The walls were lined with industrial shelving units holding containers of various sizes. Vintage leather suitcases, metal filing cabinets, locked strongboxes that looked like they belonged in a bank vault. Sofia approached the nearest suitcase, her hands trembling as she unlatched it. The leather was butter-soft, expensive, probably 60 or 70 years old. Inside, wrapped in acid-free paper, were stacks of currency. Not modern bills but older ones, some so pristine they looked freshly printed. She recognized 20s, 50s, 100s, all pre-1970s designs. She opened another case. More money. And another. Gold certificates this time, the kind that hadn't been in circulation since the 1930s. Bearer bonds in denominations that made her vision blur. "Oh my God," Sofia whispered. Her voice sounded strange in the sealed space, too loud and too quiet at once. "Oh my God, Grandma, what did you do?" She moved systematically now, her nursing training taking over. Assess, document, don't panic. She used her phone to photograph everything, the flash creating harsh shadows against the organized rows of wealth. She opened filing cabinets to find documents in languages she didn't recognize, immigration papers, faded photographs of people whose faces held expressions she understood instinctively. Hope, fear, desperation. And in the center of it all, on a small desk, a locked journal with Magda's name embossed in faded gold on the leather cover. Sofia tried the desk drawers. The first held more papers, manifests of some kind, dates and names and numbers that meant nothing to her. The second drawer was locked. She used the crowbar to force it, wincing at the sound of splintering wood. Inside, a small metal box containing a key that fit the journal's lock. Her phone buzzed, making her jump. A text from Emma. "Where are you?" Sofia's fingers shook as she typed back. "Factory. Couldn't sleep. Checking something. Be back soon." The response came immediately. "It's 3 a.m. Mom. WTF, I know. Sorry. Go back to sleep." Instead of responding, Emma called. Sofia stared at the phone, then let it go to voicemail. She'd explain later. Or try to. "How did you explain that you'd found what looked like millions of dollars hidden in your dead grandmother's factory? That you were standing in a secret room that shouldn't exist, surrounded by evidence of something that looked increasingly like a crime?" Sofia forced herself to think methodically. She needed to count this money, or at least estimate it. She needed to understand what these documents meant. She needed the journal. She picked it up, feeling its weight. Whatever answers existed, they'd start there. But as she moved toward the stairs, her phone flashlight swept across something she'd missed. Fresh cigarette butts near the entrance to the sub-basement. Not ancient relics but recent, days old, maybe a week. And footprints in the dust that weren't hers. Someone else had been down here. Recently. Someone who knew about this space. Sofia's blood went cold. She grabbed the journal and ran for the stairs, suddenly desperate to be out of this buried room with its secrets and its money and its evidence that she wasn't the first person to find it. She squeezed through the gap in the wall, stumbled up the basement stairs, and burst into the factory's main floor, gasping for breath. Through the grimy windows, she could see the first gray light of dawn. And in the loading dock parking lot, a car she didn't recognize. Dark sedan, engine running, headlights off. Someone sitting in the driver's seat, watching the factory entrance. Watching her. Sofia killed her flashlight and pressed herself against the wall, heart slamming against her ribs. The car sat there for another minute, long enough for her to memorize its shape, its position, then slowly pulled away, disappearing down the street without turning on its lights. She waited 5 full minutes before moving. Then she locked the factory door behind her with shaking hands and drove back to the motel, the journal hidden under her seat, her mind racing through implications she didn't want to face. The money was real. Millions of dollars, maybe more. Hidden for decades in a space someone else knew about. Someone who was watching, waiting. And Sofia had just announced her discovery to whoever that was. Sofia made it back to the motel as dawn broke properly over Millbrook. Her hands had finally stopped shaking, but the journal sat in her lap like a live grenade. She'd locked it in the car's glove compartment when she parked, some instinct telling her not to bring it into the room where her children slept. Emma was awake, sitting cross-legged on the bed with her laptop open. She looked up when Sofia entered, her expression somewhere between anger and concern. 3 hours, Emma said flatly. You were gone 3 hours. I'm sorry. I couldn't sleep, and I needed to. You went back to that factory, alone, in the middle of the night. Emma's voice rose. Do you have any idea how that feels? I woke up and you were just gone, after everything with Dad. Sofia crossed the room and pulled her daughter into a hug, feeling Emma resist before finally sagging against her. I'm sorry, she whispered into Emma's hair. You're right. That was stupid and selfish. I should have woken you. Yeah, you should have. Emma pulled back, wiping her eyes angrily. So what was so important? Sofia glanced at Lucas, still asleep, then back to Emma. The urge to protect her, to shield her from whatever her grandmother had been involved in, warred with the knowledge that Emma deserved truth. She'd lost her father. She didn't need a mother who lied. I found something, Sofia said quietly. In the basement, behind that wall. Emma's eyes widened. You broke through it? By yourself? Most of it. There's a hidden room, a sub-basement. Sofia took a breath. Emma, there's money down there. A lot of money. And documents. And... She trailed off, unsure how to explain what she'd seen. How much money? I don't know exactly. I didn't have time to count it all. But millions, Emma. Maybe tens of millions. Emma stared at her. Then slowly, deliberately, she closed her laptop. We're rich. No. We don't know where it came from or... We're rich, Emma repeated, something fierce and desperate in her voice. Mom, do you understand? We could pay off Dad's medical bills. We could move somewhere nice. I could go to college without... She stopped, her face flushing. Without what? Nothing. Forget it. But Sofia understood. Without worrying that her mother was killing herself with double shifts. Without guilt that her education would push them further into debt. Without the weight that had settled over their family since Michael died. The knowledge that they were drowning and no one was coming to save them. It's not that simple, Sofia said. Someone else knows about that room. There was a car outside the factory this morning. Watching. The hope in Emma's face flickered. What do you mean, watching? I mean your great-grandmother was hiding something, and we're not the only ones who know about it. Lucas stirred in his bed, sitting up slowly. His hair stuck up at odd angles, and he clutched the recipe book against his chest like a shield. What's happening? Sofia sat on the edge of his bed. We need to talk about the factory, about what I found last night. She explained it as simply as she could, the hidden room, the money, the evidence that suggested Magda had been involved in something complex and possibly illegal. Lucas listened with the peculiar intensity he'd developed since his father's death, absorbing information without judgment. So great-grandma was like a spy? He asked when she finished. I don't know what she was. That's what we need to figure out. Can I see it? The hidden room? Sofia hesitated. Every instinct said to keep her children away from whatever this was. But they were already involved. They'd been involved the moment Magda left Sofia that factory. Later, she promised. First, I need to talk to someone who knew her. She found Tony Borowski's address in the estate papers, a small house 3 blocks from the factory. He answered the door in worn work pants and a flannel shirt, his face craggy with age but his eyes sharp. Mrs. West, he said, not quite a question. Ms., Sofia corrected automatically. But please call me Sofia. I'm sorry to show up unannounced. I was hoping we could talk about my grandmother. Something shifted in Tony's expression. Not quite suspicion, but caution. What about her? Can I come in? He studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside. His living room was neat, sparsely furnished, dominated by photographs on every surface. Many showed the bread factory in its prime, workers in white aprons, bread coming off production lines in perfect rows, a younger Tony grinning beside massive ovens, and Magda, in nearly every photo, stern-faced and commanding, her presence impossible to ignore even in black and white. "You worked for her a long time," Sofia said. 60 years. Started when I was 20, fresh off the boat from Poland." Tony settled into an armchair, gesturing for Sofia to sit on the couch. "Your grandmother gave me a job when no one else would. Taught me the trade. Became like family. Then you knew her well. Better than most." His eyes were watering now, grief raw on his weathered face. "She was a good woman. Whatever your father told you." "My father told me she was dangerous, that people died because of her." Sofia leaned forward. Was he right? Tony was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "She saved my family. My parents, my little sister. We were supposed to die in Warsaw, but Magda got us out. Got us here." He gestured to the photos. "Everything I have, everything I am, I owe to her." "How did she get you out?" "The bread trucks. They were modified, false bottoms, hidden compartments. During deliveries, they'd pick up refugees at safe houses. Bring them to the factory. We'd hide in the sub-basement until papers could be arranged, transportation to other cities." His voice was distant now, remembering. "It wasn't just us. Hundreds of people. Czechs, Poles, Hungarians, East Germans. Anyone running from the Soviets." Sofia's throat tightened. "The sub-basement. You knew about it." "Of course I knew. I helped build it in 1956. Tony's gaze sharpened. "You found it. Last night. And I found what she was keeping down there." Tony's hand moved to his keyring, his fingers finding a small brass key. The same key Sofia had noticed yesterday, identical to the one she'd found in Magda's desk. The key to the journal. "She made me promise," Tony said quietly. "When she got sick, she said the right person would come eventually. Someone who deserved to know the truth." He looked at Sofia with an intensity that made her want to look away. "Is that you? Do you deserve it?" "I don't know," Sofia admitted. "I barely knew her. My father made sure of that." "Robert." Tony's expression hardened. He never understood. He saw his mother helping strangers and thought she didn't love him. But Magda loved him enough to push him away, to make him hate her so he'd stay safe from the people who were looking for her. What people? The ones whose money she took. The ones she betrayed when they tried to use her network for their own purposes. Tony stood, moving to a bookshelf. He pulled down a photo album, flipped to a page near the back, and handed it to Sofia. The photograph showed a bread delivery truck, Magda standing beside it with a group of maybe 15 people. Men, women, children, their faces holding that same expression Sofia had seen in the documents. Hope and fear in equal measure. 1968, Tony said. Prague Spring. We got 37 people out that year. But there were others who wanted to use the network. Criminals. Soviet informants pretending to be refugees. Magda had to make choices about who deserved help and who didn't. He paused. Not everyone agreed with those choices. Sofia's phone buzzed. A text from Emma. Mom, someone just delivered a letter to the motel. Looks official. Says it's urgent. Sofia's stomach dropped. She showed Tony the text. You should go, he said. But as she stood to leave, he held out his hand. In his palm lay the small brass key. She wanted you to have this. To understand. The journal. Everything. The truth. What she did and why she did it. Tony's voice cracked. She wasn't perfect. She made terrible choices. But she saved hundreds of lives, Sofia. Don't let anyone tell you she was just a criminal. Sofia took the key, its weight somehow heavier than brass should be. Someone was watching the factory this morning. In a dark sedan. Tony's face went pale. Then they know you found it. You need to be careful. Get your children somewhere safe. And whatever you decide to do with what's down there, decide quickly. The longer you wait, the more dangerous this becomes. The letter at the motel was from a law firm. Not Harold's, but a corporate outfit from Chicago. The message was brief and aggressive. Frank Hutchins wished to make an immediate offer on the factory property. $500,000, cash, closing within the week. The tone made it clear this was not a negotiation but an expectation. Sofia crumpled the letter. $500,000 would solve all her problems. Pay off Michael's medical bills. Give her children security. Let her walk away from whatever her grandmother had been involved in. But it wouldn't give her answers. Her phone rang. A number she didn't recognize, local area code. Ms. West? This is Detective Iris Martinez with Millbrook PD. I'm calling about your grandmother's estate. Would you have time to answer a few questions? Sofia closed her eyes. It was starting. The walls closing in. Whatever Magda had hidden, whatever secrets lay in that sub-basement, they were about to drag Sofia and her children into the light. Of course, she heard herself say. When would you like to meet? Detective Iris Martinez arrived at the motel 30 minutes later, driving an unmarked sedan that made Sofia's chest tighten until she saw the woman who emerged. Mid-40s, professional but not cold, with kind eyes that took in Sofia's exhaustion with what looked like understanding rather than suspicion. Thank you for meeting with me on short notice, Martinez said, settling into the motel room's single chair while Sofia perched on the bed. Emma had taken Lucas to get breakfast at the diner down the street, giving them privacy. I understand you've just inherited the Heritage Bread Factory. That's right. Had you been in contact with your grandmother before her death? Sofia shook her head. We were estranged. I hadn't spoken to her in 15 years. May I ask why? Family issues. My father and grandmother had a falling out. I took his side. Sofia met Martinez's gaze. I was 23. I didn't ask enough questions. Martinez made a note. I'm asking because we've received some inquiries about the property. A developer, Frank Hutchins, has been quite persistent in wanting to know when the estate would be settled. And this morning, we had an interesting call from someone claiming to have information about illegal activities connected to the factory. Sofia's mouth went dry. What kind of activities? The caller didn't specify. Anonymous tip. But it triggered a review of some old files. Martinez pulled out a thin folder. Did you know your grandmother was investigated by the FBI in 1972? No. For what? Suspected involvement in an underground railroad helping refugees escape Eastern Europe. The investigation was dropped. Insufficient evidence. But there were questions about how she was funding the operation, where the refugees were going, whether money was changing hands. Martinez paused. The file suggests she might have been taking payments from the people she helped. Sofia thought of the sub-basement, the carefully organized wealth. Magda's journal locked in her car. Was that illegal? Taking payment to help people escape communism? Depends on how it was done. If money crossed certain borders, if proper documentation wasn't filed, if she was evading taxes on income. Martinez shrugged. It gets complicated, especially during the Cold War. Some people considered it humanitarian work. Others called it human smuggling. What do you think? Martinez was quiet for a moment. My grandfather came from Guatemala in 1982. Civil War. Someone helped him get across the border, get papers, find work. He never told us who or how much it cost. But without that help, my mother wouldn't have been born. I wouldn't be here. She looked at Sofia directly. So I think it's more complicated than legal or illegal. Sofia felt something ease in her chest. Why are you telling me this? Because you're about to find things out about your grandmother that will force you to make decisions. And I want you to know that I understand complicated. Martinez leaned forward. But I also need to know, have you found anything in the factory that I should be aware of? Documents, money, anything that might explain why people are suddenly so interested in that property? This was it. The moment to tell the truth or lie. Sofia thought of the cigarette butts in the sub-basement. The car watching the factory. Frank Hutchins's aggressive offer. The anonymous tip to the police. I need to show you something, Sofia said. But not here. And I need your word that whatever I show you, you'll give me time to understand it before you take official action. Martinez studied her. I can't promise that. If there's evidence of a crime, 24 hours. That's all I'm asking. Give me one day to figure out what my grandmother was involved in before you bring in the FBI or whoever else needs to know. Ms. West, please. I have 2 kids who just lost their father. If what's in that factory destroys the last connection they have to their family history, I need to be the one who explains it to them. Not strangers. Not in interrogation rooms. Sofia's voice cracked. One day, then I'll cooperate with whatever investigation needs to happen. Martinez was silent for a long moment. Then she stood. Show me what you found. If it's what I think it is, we'll talk about next steps. The factory felt different in daylight with someone else present. Less menacing, more sad. A monument to something that had ended badly. Sofia led Martinez to the basement, to the gap she'd made in the false wall. Jesus, Martinez breathed, looking at the opening. How long has this been here? Since 1956, according to someone who knew my grandmother. He said they used it to hide refugees until they could be relocated. They descended into the sub-basement together. In daylight filtering through the gap, the organized wealth looked even more surreal. Martinez moved through the space methodically, examining containers without touching them, her cop's brain cataloging evidence. This is millions of dollars, she said finally. Maybe tens of millions. Different currencies, different time periods. She opened a filing cabinet, pulled out a document, squinted at it. Immigration papers. Czech, Polish, Hungarian names. Dating back to the 50s. There's more. Sofia retrieved Magda's journal from her car and handed Martinez the key Tony had given her. My grandmother kept records. Of everything, I think. Martinez unlocked the journal carefully. They sat on the sub-basement floor, backs against the wall, and read together as sunlight crept across the concrete. Magda's handwriting was precise, almost clinical in the early entries. She described her arrival in America in 1951 with nothing but the clothes on her back and memories of family members who hadn't survived. The determination to build something. The gradual realization that others needed the same help she'd received. March 1956. The first family arrived last night. The Kowalskis, no relation, though the name feels like fate. Mother, father, 3 children. They hid in the truck for 6 hours. When we opened the compartment, the youngest was barely breathing. We got them out just in time. I've decided to build a proper hiding place. Tony says he can do it quietly without anyone knowing. The basement is deep enough. We can make it climate-controlled, safe. Proper sanctuary. The entries continued year after year. Names and dates. Successes and near misses. The network growing, becoming more organized. Other safe houses in other cities. Drivers she trusted. Immigration lawyers who looked the other way. But the tone shifted in the late 60s, became coded, paranoid. June 1968. Novak came to me with his family's money. $2 million, he said. For passage. His father was a resistance leader, needed to escape before the Soviets closed in. I agreed. Then I found the letters. He was no resistance leader. He was reporting to the KGB, giving them names of refugees' safe house locations. 3 families disappeared because of him. 3 families I helped get out, gone back into Soviet hands. I kept the money, let him think I was arranging passage. Then I made sure he never left Prague. God forgive me. Sofia felt Martinez stiffen beside her. She killed him? It doesn't say that, just that she made sure he didn't leave. She kept $2 million that belonged to someone else. Someone who was betraying refugees to the KGB. Sofia turned pages, her hands shaking. My grandmother made impossible choices. The later entries detailed other betrayals, other people who tried to use Magda's network for profit or politics. Criminals who wanted to smuggle drugs along with refugees. Soviet informants pretending to need help. Magda dealt with each ruthlessly, keeping money meant for betrayers, redirecting it to legitimate refugees. The Americans ask questions sometimes. FBI agents sniffing around. I tell them nothing. Let them think I'm just a baker who feels sorry for people. They can't prove anything because I've been careful. Every dollar accounted for, even if I can't show them where it came from. Robert found some papers yesterday. He's asking questions, getting angry. He thinks I'm a criminal who cares more about strangers than family. He doesn't understand. I pushed him away to protect him. If they ever come for me, I need him to be innocent. To honestly say he knew nothing. It breaks my heart. But better a broken heart than a dead son. The final entries were dated just months before Magda's death. I'm dying. Pancreatic cancer. The doctor gives me 6 months, maybe a year. I've spent 60 years building this fortune, piece by piece, from people who didn't deserve it. Now I need to decide what happens to it. I could give it to the government. Let them figure out where it came from. But they'd confiscate it, tie it up in bureaucracy. The people it was meant for would never see it. I could destroy it, burn it all, take my secrets to the grave. But that feels like cowardice. Or I could leave it for Sofia. She's stronger than she knows, smart enough to understand moral complexity. If she finds it, and she will, she has her father's stubbornness. She'll have to decide what's right. Not what's legal. What's right. That's the gift I'm giving her. The burden I'm placing on her shoulders. The same burden I've carried for 60 years. Someone has to decide what justice looks like when the law can't reach. I've made my choices. Now she'll make hers. Sofia closed the journal, her vision blurring with tears she hadn't known were falling. Beside her, Martinez was silent, her own eyes wet. Your grandmother was. Martinez started, then stopped. I don't know what she was. Human, Sofia said quietly. She was human, and she did terrible things for what she thought were good reasons. The money was stolen from criminals and informants and people who betrayed refugees. Sofia stood, her legs cramped from sitting. The question is, does that make it clean or dirty? Martinez stood too, looking around the sub-basement with new eyes. There are names in that journal. People who might have legitimate claims, and people who definitely don't. Viktor Novak's family, for instance, if he's still alive, he might argue he's owed that $2 million. Even though his father was working for the KGB. Even though, or especially because. Martinez rubbed her face. This is going to get very complicated very quickly. When this gets out, and it will get out, you're going to have lawyers, federal agents, claimants coming out of everywhere. The IRS alone will have a field day. I know. Sofia looked at the organized containers, the carefully preserved evidence of her grandmother's impossible life. So what do I do? Martinez was quiet for a long moment. Then, you have until tomorrow morning. That's all I can give you. Figure out what you want to do. Then we bring in the proper authorities and let them sort it out. And if I want to honor my grandmother's wishes, distribute this money to the people it was meant for, then you'd better have excellent documentation and a very good lawyer. Martinez headed for the stairs, then paused. For what it's worth, I think your grandmother was trying to do the right thing in an impossible situation. That doesn't make it legal, but it might make it forgivable. After Martinez left, Sofia sat alone in the sub-basement, holding Magda's journal, surrounded by decades of moral complexity turned into currency. Emma and Lucas would be back soon, expecting answers, and Sofia realized she had none. Just questions and a fortune, and her grandmother's voice echoing through the pages. Someone has to decide what justice looks like when the law can't reach. The burden had been passed. The choice was hers now. Sofia didn't make it back to the motel before the next threat arrived. She was locking the factory door, Magda's journal tucked under her arm, when a black SUV pulled into the loading dock. Not the sedan from this morning, something bigger, more aggressive. 2 men emerged, both wearing suits that looked expensive and out of place in Millbrook's industrial decay. Ms. West, the taller one, approached with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'm Agent James Wu, FBI. This is my partner, Agent Reeves. We'd like to ask you some questions about your grandmother's estate. Sofia's grip tightened on the journal. Detective Martinez just left. I've already answered questions. Local police. Wu's tone dismissed Martinez entirely. We're federal. Different jurisdiction, different concerns. He pulled out a folded document. We have a warrant to search these premises. Anonymous tips suggested there might be undocumented assets connected to Cold War-era financial crimes. I need to call my lawyer. You're welcome to. But the warrant is valid whether you have legal counsel present or not. Wu gestured to the factory. We can do this cooperatively, or we can do it the hard way. Your choice. Sofia's phone buzzed. Emma. Mom, Frank Hutchins is at the motel. Says he needs to talk to you right now. He's being really aggressive. Then another text, this time from an unknown number. Ms. West, this is Tony. Don't go back to motel. Take kids somewhere safe. We'll explain later. Her heart hammered. I need to make a call. My children. 5 minutes, Wu said. Then we're going in with or without you. Sofia stepped away, dialing Emma with shaking hands. Her daughter answered immediately, her voice tight with fear. Mom, this guy is saying you owe him money for the factory. That grandma had debts and he's legally entitled to. Put Lucas in the car. Drive to Tony Borowski's house. The address is in the estate papers. Don't talk to Frank Hutchins. Don't answer any more questions. Just go. But, now Emma, please. She heard her daughter moving, heard Lucas's confused questions in the background. Then Frank Hutchins's voice, angry and demanding. Ms. West, we need to discuss this situation immediately. I've been more than patient. The call cut off. Sofia tried calling back. It went straight to voicemail. She tried again, her panic rising, when a new vehicle pulled up. A Mercedes sedan, silver, immaculate. An elderly man emerged, moving with the careful dignity of someone who'd once been powerful and hadn't forgotten it. He had a slight Eastern European accent when he spoke. Ms. Sofia West, I've been waiting to meet you for a very long time. Who are you? Victor Novak. He pulled photographs from his jacket pocket, held them out. Black and white images of a man in his 30s, standing with a family. My father, the man your grandmother murdered. Agent Wu had turned, interest sharpening. Mr. Novak, this is federal business. This is my business, Victor interrupted smoothly. I have documentation proving Magda Kowalski took $2 million from my family in 1968 and prevented my father's escape from Czechoslovakia. He died in prison because of her. I'm here to claim what's owed, with 60 years of interest. Sofia clutched Magda's journal tighter. The pages inside told a different story. Victor's father as a KGB informant. Refugees betrayed. But before she could speak, her phone rang again. Detective Martinez. Sofia answered desperately. The factory's water main just burst, Martinez said without preamble. Frank Hutchins's construction crew was working on city pipes nearby. They claim it was an accident, but Sofia, the basement is flooding. If there's anything down there you need to protect, you have minutes, maybe less. Sofia looked at Agent Wu, at Victor Novak, at the factory door behind her. The sub-basement. All that carefully preserved evidence. Magda's records. The fortune meant to right 60-year-old wrongs. I have to go, she said to no one in particular, running for the door. Wu moved to stop her. Ms. West, the warrant is for a building that's about to be destroyed by water damage. Sofia's voice was steel. You want to search it? Come help me save what's inside. She didn't wait for permission. She ran. Water was already seeping under the basement door when Sofia reached it. She yanked it open to find the stairs disappearing into dark, rising water. The burst main had flooded fast, too fast to be entirely accidental. Agent Wu appeared at her shoulder, swearing under his breath. How deep does this go? There's a sub-basement. Hidden. No point in lying now. Climate-controlled room with documents and assets dating back to the 50s. If that water reaches it. She didn't finish. Wu was already on his radio calling for pumps, for backup, for someone to shut off the water main. But Sofia knew they didn't have time. The gap she'd made in the false wall was low to the ground. Water would pour through it, destroying everything Magda had preserved. Detective Martinez arrived minutes later, took in the situation, and made a decision. Wu, your warrant covers searching the premises, not salvage operations. Ms. West, you have keys to this building. What do you need? Sofia understood what Martinez was offering. A window. A choice before federal bureaucracy swallowed everything. Tony Borowski, Sofia said. He knows the building systems, and I need to get documents out before they're destroyed. Martinez nodded. Woo, we're coordinating with local emergency services. Standard flood response. Ms. West has the right to protect her property from water damage. Woo's jaw tightened, but he couldn't argue with the logic. While he coordinated with his team, Martinez drove Sofia to Tony's house. They found Emma's car already there, Emma and Lucas inside with Tony. Her daughter's face was pale with fear and anger. Frank Hutchins followed us, Emma said as soon as Sofia entered. He was shouting about debts and legal action and, Mom, he scared Lucas. Her son sat on Tony's couch, small and quiet, the recipe book clutched in his hands. Sofia pulled him close, feeling his heart racing against her chest. It's okay. You're safe here. Tony says Grandma was a hero, Lucas whispered. Is that true? Sofia met Tony's eyes over her son's head. The old man's expression was grave but steady. He'd been waiting 60 years to tell this story properly. Yes, Sofia said, and also complicated. But we'll explain everything, I promise. Right now, I need Tony's help. They worked through the afternoon, Sofia, Martinez, Tony, and surprisingly, Emma. Lucas stayed at Tony's house with a neighbor who'd been one of Magda's refugees, an elderly woman who started telling him stories about his great-grandmother while teaching him to knead dough. The water had been shut off, but damage was done. The main basement was ankle-deep. They waded through it to the false wall, where water had indeed poured into the sub-basement. The lower stairs were submerged, but the room itself was built on a slight elevation. Magda's foresight saving most of the contents. Tony directed them with the authority of someone who'd built this space. Financial documents first, the journals, then the immigration papers. The money can wait, it's waterproof enough. They formed a chain, passing containers up and out. Emma worked without complaint, her tech-savvy mind cataloging everything, taking photos, creating a digital record. When she opened one filing cabinet and found photographs of young families, hope and fear in their faces, she stopped. These people, she said quietly. Grandma saved all these people. Hundreds, Tony confirmed. Maybe more. I lost count after the first decade. Agent Wu appeared in the doorway, watching them work. His expression was unreadable. You know I can't let you just take evidence. It's not evidence until you prove a crime, Martinez countered. Right now, it's historical documents being saved from water damage in a privately owned building. There's clearly money down here. Undeclared assets. Possibly, Martinez agreed. Or possibly charitable donations collected over decades for refugee assistance. Hard to say without proper documentation, which we're currently saving. The standoff held for a moment. Then Wu's radio crackled. Something about Victor Novak presenting documents to the federal prosecutor's office. Claims against the estate. Wu swore and left. Thank you, Sofia said to Martinez. Don't thank me yet. I'm buying you hours, not days. And Wu's not wrong. There are laws about unreported assets, especially of this magnitude. Martinez helped lift another container. But I also know that justice and law aren't always the same thing. My grandfather used to say the people who helped him weren't breaking laws. They were fixing them. By evening, they'd salvaged most of the crucial documents. The money remained in the sub-basement. Too much to move quickly, too obvious to hide. Sofia stood in the damaged space, water still pooling in corners, and made a decision. I need to know the truth about Victor Novak's father, she said. The journal says he was KGB, but Victor has documentation saying otherwise. Someone's lying. I can help with that, Emma said. She'd been quiet for the last hour, her phone glowing in her hands. I found something. An investigative journalist named Zara Novak. She's been researching Cold War refugee networks. And guess what? She's Victor's granddaughter. Sofia's head snapped up. She contacted you? I contacted her. After you found the journal, I started searching online. Her research kept coming up. so I messaged her. Emma's voice was defensive. I thought she might have answers. Emma. She wants to meet. Tomorrow. She says she has documents that contradict her grandfather's story. Emma looked up from her phone. Mom. She thinks he's been lying for 60 years, and she wants to help us prove it. Martinez and Sofia exchanged glances. It was risky, could be a trap, but it was also exactly what they needed. Someone inside Victor's family who might know the truth. Set up the meeting, Sofia said, but public place, and we all go together. That night, camped in Tony's living room with boxes of Magda's documents surrounding them, Sofia finally opened the second journal Tony had mentioned, Magda's financial accounting. Every dollar meticulously recorded. Source, date, disposition. Money taken from KGB informants. Money paid by grateful refugee families. Money embezzled from criminal smugglers who tried to use Magda's network for drugs. And a final page, dated just before Magda's death. A list of names. Refugees and their descendants. People who'd been helped. People who deserved to know the full story. She made a map, Sofia whispered, of everyone the money should go to. Tony looked over her shoulder. She spent 5 years compiling that, tracking people down, making sure she knew where they were, who they'd become. His voice cracked. She wanted you to finish what she started, to give them what they were owed. Sofia looked at her children. Emma bent over her laptop, coordinating with Zara. Lucas asleep on the couch, the recipe book still in his hands. Flour dusting his shirt from his lesson with Tony's neighbor. They were in danger. Federal agents circling. Victor Novak demanding his father's share. Frank Hutchins sabotaging infrastructure. And somewhere in the shadows, whoever had been watching the factory, leaving cigarette butts, knowing about the sub-basement before Sofia did. But they also had something precious, truth, documented, preserved, ready to be told. Tomorrow, Sofia said, we meet with Zara. We find out what really happened in 1968. Then we decide what justice looks like. Martinez nodded. Tony squeezed her shoulder. Emma looked up from her screen and smiled. The first real smile Sofia had seen from her daughter in months. They had 24 hours before Wu returned with reinforcements. 24 hours to turn Magda's secrets into something resembling redemption. It would have to be enough. The meeting with Zara Novak was set for noon at Betty's Diner. Public, visible, with escape routes if needed. Sofia arrived early with Emma and Martinez, leaving Lucas with Tony and a promise to text every 30 minutes. Zara walked in exactly on time. She was 32 but looked younger, with dark hair pulled back and eyes that held her grandfather's intensity without the cruelty. She carried a worn leather messenger bag and moved with the careful awareness of someone used to dangerous situations. Ms. West. She slid into the booth across from Sofia. Thank you for meeting me. I know this is complicated. Your grandfather claims my grandmother murdered his father and stole $2 million, Sofia said flatly. That's not complicated. That's criminal. Except it's not true. Zara pulled documents from her bag. I've spent 3 years researching this. Czech archives opened in 2020. I found my great-grandfather's file. She spread papers across the table. Joseph Novak wasn't a resistance leader. He was an informant. STB Czech secret police working with the KGB. Emma leaned forward, her phone already recording. Sofia saw Martinez's expression shift from cautious to intent. These are official records, Zara continued. Reports Joseph filed about refugee movements. Safe house locations. 3 families were captured and sent back because of his intelligence. One family, the Dubrovskis, barely escaped. Sofia thought of the elderly couple who'd visited the factory. The tears when they spoke of Magda saving them. Your grandfather knows this? He's known for decades. Zara's voice was bitter. My whole life, he told me stories about how his father was a hero betrayed by Magda Kowalski. How she took money meant for the resistance. But when I started researching for my book, found these documents, confronted him. She stopped, composing herself. He admitted the truth. then told me it didn't matter, that his father's cooperation with the Soviets was forced, that Magda had no right to judge, that the money was still owed. Why are you telling us this? Martinez asked. Because I'm a journalist. I care about truth. Zara looked at Emma. And because your generation deserves to know what actually happened. My grandfather is trying to rewrite history to absolve his father. I won't let him. Sofia's phone buzzed. A text from Tony. Frank Hutchins at factory with crew. Says he has right to inspect property damage. Won't leave. Then another from an unknown number. You have something that belongs to me. We should talk. Privately. VN Sofia showed Martinez, who immediately stood. We need to get back there. Now. They left Zara at the diner with a promise to share more evidence later. The drive to the factory took 5 minutes that felt like hours. Sofia's mind raced through scenarios. Frank forcing his way into the sub-basement, discovering what remained of the fortune. Viktor Novak making his own move. Wu returning with federal marshals. The factory parking lot was chaos. Frank's crew, 3 men in construction gear, stood near the basement entrance. Tony blocked the doorway, elderly but immovable. And near the loading dock, Viktor Novak's Mercedes, the old man emerging with 2 younger associates. Ms. West. Frank's voice carried across the lot, aggressive and entitled. We need to discuss compensation. The water damage was caused by city infrastructure failures. My company is liable, but we need to assess the extent. You need to leave my property, Sofia said. Your property is worthless. A money pit. I'm offering you a way out. Frank moved closer, and Sofia saw something in his expression that made her step back. Desperation. Fear beneath the bluster. 500,000. Today. Cash. You sign over the deed, walk away clean. She's not interested, Martinez said, her hand moving to her badge. This is a private business negotiation. On private property where you're trespassing. Martinez's voice hardened. Leave. Now. Frank's crew exchanged glances. One of them, younger, nervous, started backing toward their truck. But Frank held his ground. You don't understand what you're dealing with, he said, looking at Sofia. People have been waiting decades for Magda to die, for this property to finally be available. You think you can just... He stopped as Viktor Novak approached. The 2 men's eyes met, and Sofia saw it, recognition. Coordination. They'd been working together. Mr. Hutchins, Viktor said smoothly. Perhaps we should let Ms. West consider her options calmly. We're past that, Frank snapped. She's had time. She's stalling. And meanwhile, federal agents are crawling all over. Which is why... Viktor interrupted. We need to resolve this quickly. Ms. West, I'm prepared to be reasonable. The full $2 million I'm owed, plus interest, comes to approximately $12 million in today's dollars. I'll settle for 10. Cash. Drawn from whatever assets your grandmother left. In exchange, I'll withdraw my claims and let you deal with the government on your own. Sofia felt Emma tense beside her. 10 million would leave most of the fortune intact. Would buy off Viktor, satisfy his need for validation. It would be the smart play. No, Sofia said. Viktor's pleasant expression flickered. I'm sorry. Your father was a traitor who got people killed. My grandmother kept money he stole from refugees. You're not owed anything except the truth, which your granddaughter is going to publish regardless of what I do. Sofia's voice was steady despite her racing heart. So no, take me to court if you want, but you're not getting paid for your father's crimes. Something dark crossed Viktor's face. The charm dropped away, revealing the ruthlessness beneath. You're making a mistake. She's making a choice, Martinez corrected. And you're about to make one. Leave peacefully, or I arrest you for trespassing and attempted extortion. Frank lunged forward. Not at Sofia but at Tony, trying to push past him into the factory. There's money in there. Millions. She found it and she's trying to... Tony didn't move. Despite being 80 years old, facing a man 30 years younger, he stood his ground. Frank grabbed his shoulder, and everything happened at once. Emma screamed. Martinez moved toward them, and Sofia saw one of Victor's associates pull something from his jacket. Not a gun, but a phone, filming everything. They wanted her to assault them, to give them grounds for a lawsuit, for federal intervention, for something that would force her hand. Sofia grabbed Emma and pulled her back just as Agent Wu's SUV screeched into the parking lot, followed by 2 more federal vehicles. Wu emerged with 4 other agents, his expression grim. "Everyone step away from the building," he commanded. "Ms. West, we have an expanded warrant. This property is now under federal investigation for money laundering, tax evasion, and potential involvement in organized crime." "Organized crime?" Sofia's voice cracked. "My grandmother helped refugees. Your grandmother moved millions of dollars across international borders without reporting it. She maintained hidden assets for over 60 years. Whether her intentions were noble doesn't change the law." Wu gestured to his team. "We're seizing the property and all its contents pending investigation. You have 10 minutes to remove personal items. Everything else stays." "You can't," Martinez started. "I can, and I am." Wu looked at Sofia, and she saw something almost like sympathy in his eyes. "I'm sorry, but this is bigger than Millbrook. There are Cold War-era financial crimes, international implications. People in Washington want answers." Sofia's phone rang. Tony's number. But Tony was standing right there, watching federal agents move past him into the factory. She answered, confused. Lucas's voice, small and terrified. "Mom? Mom, someone's at Tony's house. They say they need to talk to you about the factory. They won't leave. I'm scared." Sofia's blood turned to ice. She looked at Victor, at Frank, saw the calculation in their expressions. The attempted kidnapping Martinez had warned about wasn't a future threat. It was happening now. "Emma, keys. Now." Sofia's voice was steel. Martinez was already moving, speaking into her radio, calling for backup at Tony's address. They ran for Emma's car. Behind them, federal agents poured into the factory. Victor Novak stood watching, his expression unreadable. And Frank Hutchins was on his phone, speaking rapidly to someone Sofia couldn't identify. The chess pieces were moving, the walls closing in. And somewhere in Tony's house, Lucas waited, frightened and alone, while people who wanted Magda's fortune made their final moves. Sofia pressed the accelerator, her hands white-knuckled on the wheel. Martinez's voice crackled over the radio in her car, coordinating with Millbrook PD. Emma beside her was calling Lucas, getting no answer, her panic rising. They were 3 blocks from Tony's house when Sofia saw it. Smoke rising from the direction of the factory. Not thick, not yet, but visible. A fire. Another accident. Another pressure point. "They're destroying evidence," Martinez said grimly, forcing Wu to focus on the fire while she didn't finish. They all understood. While the FBI dealt with the factory, Victor and Frank's people were at Tony's house. With Lucas, with leverage. Sofia had spent 2 years learning to live with loss. With Michael's death. With debt and exhaustion and the slow erosion of hope. But this, her son in danger because of her grandmother's secrets, this was different. This was a line she wouldn't let them cross. "Martinez," she said quietly, "whatever happens next, whatever I have to do to get Lucas safe, you didn't see it." The detective met her eyes in the rearview mirror. A long moment passed. Then Martinez nodded. Tony's house came into view. A van parked outside, engine running. The front door open. And through the window, shadows moving, voices raised. Sofia was out of the car before it fully stopped, running toward her son, toward whatever came next, ready to become exactly what her grandmother had been. Someone willing to break any rule, cross any line, pay any price. For family, for what was right, for justice when the law couldn't reach. The choice had been made. Sofia burst through Tony's door to find Lucas pressed against the wall, tears streaming down his face. One of Frank's contractors stood near him, the same nervous young man from the factory. But his hands were raised, empty, placating. "Lady, I didn't sign up for this," he said quickly. "Hutchins told me to come here, talk to the kid, get information." But I'm not kidnapping anyone. I'm leaving. Martinez was behind Sofia, weapon drawn. On the ground. Now. The man complied immediately, relief visible on his face. I'll testify, whatever you need. Hutchins has been planning this for weeks. Him and that Novak guy. They knew about the money before the grandmother even died. Sofia gathered Lucas into her arms, feeling his small body shake. Emma stood in the doorway, her phone recording everything. Smart girl. Evidence. How did they know? Contractor looked up. But lady, your grandmother? She helped my grandparents get out of Hungary in '67. They're still alive. Still grateful. When I figured out who you were, who she was, I couldn't do it. Sofia's phone buzzed. Tony. Factory fire contained. Wu found accelerant. Frank's people started it. They're in custody. Then another text from Zara. My grandfather just left the country. Private jet to Prague. He knew this was coming. Martinez hauled the contractor to his feet, reading him his rights. But Sofia's mind was already moving forward. The threats were neutralized. Frank arrested for arson and attempted kidnapping. Victor fled. Wu and the FBI would process the factory, catalog everything, begin their investigation. Which meant Sofia had hours, maybe less, before federal seizure became permanent. Mom! Lucas's voice was small against her shoulder. What would great-grandma want us to do? The question Magda had waited 60 years for someone to ask. Sofia looked at her children. At Martinez, who'd bent rules to give them time. At Tony's neighbor, the elderly refugee woman, standing in the doorway with flour-dusted hands and memories of being saved. I know exactly what she'd want, Sofia said quietly. And I know what we need to do. 3 months later, Sofia stood in a federal courtroom wearing her only good suit. Bought secondhand for Michael's funeral and now pressed into service again. Lucas sat beside her in the gallery, Tony on his other side. Emma was at the prosecution table with Zara, their compiled evidence, digital archives, translated documents, refugee testimonies, organized into binders that told the truth about 1968. The prosecutor was offering a deal. Sofia had violated tax laws, failed to report found assets, moved money without proper documentation. But she'd also cooperated fully, provided evidence against Frank Hutchins and his co-conspirators, and voluntarily redistributed most of the fortune according to a plan the court found unusually well documented and morally defensible. Probation, the prosecutor said. 2 years. Community service. Agreement not to contest seizure of remaining undocumented assets. In exchange, no prison time. Sofia's lawyer, provided pro bono by a refugee advocacy group, leaned close. Take it. It's better than we hoped. What about the money I already distributed? Sofia asked quietly. The trust fund you established is being reviewed, but initial findings suggest the recipients were legitimate beneficiaries of your grandmother's assistance. The court is inclined to let those transfers stand. The lawyer paused. You kept detailed records. That saved you. Because Magda had taught her how, had left a roadmap, had spent 60 years preparing for someone to finish what she'd started. The judge accepted the plea. Sofia would serve no jail time but would spend the next 2 years working with refugee assistance programs, teaching job skills, helping new immigrants navigate the system. The Heritage Bread Factory would become a historic landmark and community center, its restoration funded by a portion of the seized assets. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Zara's article had gone viral. The story of a Cold War refugee smuggler, a fortune built from justice and theft in equal measure, and a granddaughter forced to decide what legacy meant. National outlets had picked it up. Documentary filmmakers were calling. Emma handled it with surprising grace, her grief channeled into storytelling. She decided to study journalism, inspired by Zara's commitment to truth over family mythology. Lucas squeezed Sofia's hand as they walked past the cameras. Can we go bake? He asked. Tony's teaching me Grandma's halal recipe today. Sofia's throat tightened. Her son had processed everything. The danger, the revelations, the impossible choices, through flour and yeast. Tony had become the grandfather Lucas had lost, teaching him not just baking but the stories behind each recipe. The refugees who'd requested certain breads. The comfort food that reminded them of home. Detective Martinez met them at her car. Her captain had reprimanded her for the liberties she'd taken, but the successful prosecution of Frank Hutchins and his associates had balanced the scales. She'd been reassigned but not fired. Viktor Novak landed in Prague, Martinez said quietly. Czech authorities arrested him yesterday. Turns out he'd been using his father's KGB connections for decades. Smuggling, money laundering, worse. Zara's article triggered an Interpol investigation. So he was never about the money, Sofia said. He was about validation. About proving his father wasn't the monster everyone said he was. Martinez shook her head. Some people can't accept the truth about their family. Sofia thought of her own father, Robert. He'd appeared at the courthouse earlier, sober for the first time in years, asking if they could talk. She'd agreed to coffee next week. Small steps toward understanding why Magda had pushed him away, why he'd believed the worst of her. The letter Tony had given her from Magda explained it all. The anonymous payments that had kept Robert's business afloat, paid for Sofia's education, covered Michael's medical expenses. Her grandmother had been protecting and supporting them from the shadows for decades. Robert had wept when he read it. I thought she didn't love me, he'd said, broken. I spent 40 years hating her, and she was taking care of us the whole time. Now, standing outside the courthouse with her children and the people who'd helped them survive the past 3 months, Sofia felt something she hadn't experienced since Michael died. Not happiness, that seemed too simple, but peace. The sense that impossible choices could be made, consequences accepted, and life would continue. The Refugee Trust Fund distributed its first payments yesterday, Tony said, reading from his phone. $100 million to 347 families. The Dubrovskis received theirs this morning. They called me crying. Sofia closed her eyes. Magda's map finally followed. Justice delayed but not denied. Mom! Emma was filming again, always documenting. What are you thinking? Sofia looked at her daughter. 16 years old and already understanding that truth was complicated. That family could be both heroic and flawed, that the right choice wasn't always the legal one. I'm thinking your great-grandmother would be proud, Sofia said. Not of me, maybe, but of all of us, of what we chose to do with what she left. Lucas tugged her hand. Can we go home now? To Millbrook. To the factory. Home. Sofia had been renting an apartment above Betty's diner. Lucas enrolled in Millbrook Elementary, Emma finishing high school remotely. The factory restoration wouldn't be complete for months, but the community had embraced them. Refugees whose families Magda had saved decades ago brought casseroles, shared stories, wept grateful tears. Yes, Sofia said. Let's go home. As they drove back to Millbrook, past farmland turning gold in autumn light, Sofia thought about legacy, about the choices that echo through generations, about her grandmother who'd saved hundreds while destroying her own family, then left a fortune and a question. What would you do? Sofia had answered. Not perfectly. Martinez demanded. Someone's been watching that factory for months. Hutchins paid them to report when the old lady finally kicked it. Said there was something valuable hidden there, worth millions. The not without cost. But honestly, and somewhere she thought Magda was satisfied. The burden had been carried. The choice had been made. The legacy would continue. 6 months after the federal hearing, Sofia stood in the Heritage Bread Factory's restored entrance hall, surrounded by the smell of rising dough and fresh paint. The dedication ceremony was scheduled for 2 o'clock. Already people were arriving, elderly refugees walking slowly up the steps, their children and grandchildren supporting them. News crews setting up cameras. Local officials preparing speeches about community and history. Emma was coordinating everything with the efficiency of someone who'd found her calling. She'd been accepted to Northwestern's journalism program with a full scholarship, funded by anonymous donors who turned out to be 3 families Magda had saved in the 1960s. Her documentary about Magda's Underground Railroad had been selected for a film festival. Lucas stood in the production kitchen with Tony, both wearing white aprons dusted with flour. They'd spent the morning baking using Magda's original recipes: honey wheat, sourdough, challah. The scent drew people inside like a memory made tangible. Ms. West, a woman approached, maybe 70, with kind eyes and a Czech accent. I'm Helena Svoboda. We spoke on the phone. The historian from Prague. Sofia shook her hand, grateful. Thank you for coming. For bringing the documents. Helena opened her briefcase, pulling out files stamped with official Czech seals. When the archives opened, I found evidence your grandmother worked with Western intelligence. Unofficially, of course. The CIA knew about her refugee network and provided limited support, intelligence on Soviet movements, warnings about compromised routes. She paused. It doesn't make everything she did legal, but it provides context the prosecutors needed. That context had helped Sofia's case, had made the difference between prison and probation, had allowed the court to see Magda as something more complex than a simple criminal. There's something else. Helena pulled out a photograph, black and white, faded but clear. Magda standing with a group of maybe 20 people in front of the factory, 1968. I found this in Joseph Novak's file. He was planning to use it as evidence, proof that Magda was smuggling. But look at the faces. Sofia studied the photograph. Young families, children, elderly couples. And in their eyes, hope, relief, the particular exhaustion of people who'd survived something terrible. The Dubrovskis are in this photo, Helena said, pointing. And the Kowalskis, and my own parents. She smiled. Your grandmother saved 47 people that year alone. Joseph Novak tried to betray them all. She stopped him. Sofia's throat tightened. Victor claimed she murdered his father. She prevented his escape. That's documented. Whether she actively caused his death or simply refused to help him, the records are unclear. Helena's expression was thoughtful. Is there a moral difference? That's the question she left for you. Through the window, Sofia saw Detective Martinez arriving with her grandfather, the man helped by an underground network fleeing Guatemala. Robert appeared moments later, sober 6 months now, his face nervous but hopeful. Sofia had agreed to let him be part of this ceremony, part of Lucas and Emma's lives again. Slowly, carefully, Zara Novak emerged from a car, her camera crew behind her. She'd continued investigating Victor's crimes, her journalistic integrity stronger than family loyalty. She'd become Emma's mentor, teaching her that truth mattered more than comfortable narratives. It's time, Emma called from the entrance. Sofia walked to the podium set up in what had been the production floor. Now it was a museum and community center. Display cases held Magda's journals, photographs of refugees she'd helped, artifacts from 60 years of impossible choices. One wall was dedicated to the names, hundreds of them, of people who'd passed through this factory on their way to new lives. Lucas stood beside Tony at a restored brick oven, ready to present the first loaf of bread made in the factory since Magda's death. A symbolic reopening, a continuation of legacy. Sofia looked at the faces before her. Refugees and their descendants, local officials, federal prosecutors who'd become reluctant allies, Martinez, who'd bent rules because she understood complicated justice, Tony, who'd kept secrets for 60 years and finally told them to the right person, her children, her father, her grandmother's ghost, present in every detail. My grandmother Magda Kowalski, Sofia began, was not a simple person. She broke laws. She made impossible choices. She saved hundreds of lives and destroyed her own family protecting them. She built a fortune from justice and theft in equal measure, then left it for someone else to decide what to do with it. She paused, looking at Lucas. My son asked me what she would have wanted. I think she wanted exactly this, for us to struggle with the questions she struggled with. To understand that right and wrong aren't always clear. That sometimes you have to break laws to serve justice. That legacy isn't what you leave behind, but what people choose to do with it. The audience was silent, listening. This factory will train refugees in job skills. Will preserve the history of people who risked everything for freedom. Will continue the work Magda started, but legally this time. transparently. Sofia smiled slightly. She would probably hate the paperwork, but she'd approve of the purpose. Applause rippled through the crowd. Lucas and Tony brought forward the first loaf of bread, golden, perfect, still steaming. Lucas offered it to the Dubrovskis, who wept as they accepted it. After the ceremony, Sofia found Robert standing alone near Magda's photograph, the young woman who'd arrived from Poland with nothing and built an empire of mercy and crime. "She loved you," Sofia said quietly, "the whole time, even when she pushed you away." Robert wiped his eyes. "I know that now. Doesn't make it hurt less. But I understand." He looked at his grandchildren, at Lucas laughing with Tony, at Emma interviewing refugees for her documentary. "She gave you what she couldn't give me, the truth, the choice, the chance to decide what family means." Sofia took his hand. They stood together, 3 generations removed from the woman who'd shaped them all, finally beginning to understand her. As the sun set over Millbrook, the factory glowed with warm light. People lingered, sharing stories, eating bread, connecting across decades and languages. Emma filmed it all. Lucas taught children how to knead dough. Tony told stories that made elderly refugees laugh and cry. And Sofia realized Magda had been right. There was no perfect answer to the questions she'd faced. No clear line between hero and criminal, sacrifice and selfishness, love and abandonment. There was only the choice to try, to do the best you could with impossible situations, to accept the consequences and hope that someone someday would understand. Sofia understood now. And that understanding, that acceptance of complexity, that willingness to carry forward despite uncertainty, was the real inheritance. Not the money, not the factory, the strength to make impossible choices and live with them. The legacy continued, not perfectly, but honestly, and in the end that was enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.